And with it being election season, we want to give you the chance to hear from the political leaders and their party views, why they stand out from the others, and of course, give them a chance to share their vision and mission with you. And we're joined in studio today by Bishop Brian Tamaki. Brian, welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, great to have you this morning. Now, let's talk about the church community, because together with your wife, Hannah, you lead Destiny Church, the largest Māori and Pacific Island church movement in New Zealand. And you're also a father, a grandfather, and now great-grandfather. Congratulations. So what are you most proud of when it comes to your church whānau?
I think the work we've seen with many lives that have been turned around from all sorts of negative lifestyles, involved in crime and drugs and the usual breakdown of family. I think for Hannah and I, that's been our greatest work, has been able to have the privilege to see them turn around and become, new people, productive people, and to get their families back together and their children out of the state, a lot of that sort of stuff. Yeah, so that's been exciting for us. And of course, building the church has always been my greatest call in life. And that's been a great journey all the way through to where we are today in politics, of all places.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. If you think back, I suppose, to your first forays in politics a number of years ago, it was even a kind of a contentious thing about should Christians be involved in politics. Do you feel like we've kind of moved on from that discussion and now it's more about who's presenting kind of the best case? Because I do remember that discussion back in the day. Should churches even be involved? Should we be political at all, right?
Well, right. And I think back then I would say that most churches would not have been a part of politics, church and state separation. I've always hung around politics and been interested in it because mainly the direction our church went then was more outside, working with people in the courts, with the police and all that sort of stuff. And we found a lot of discrepancies in the political system that was not in favour for the people. And that really got me. And I've never actually stood in the past, and I never really saw that as a option because my call was, as I said before, to build the church and advance the gospel in our country. So I had a lot of great discussions, maybe with your pastors and many leaders in this country, that yes, we should be involved, and we don't have a strong enough voice in Parliament. And I also brought up the fact is that gradually at that time, but I felt it was a bit faster than gradual, that our country was sliding back in its morals, values, and our Christian faith was beginning to be shuffled aside. Yeah.
Yeah, and in New Zealand, we have a lot of systemic issues that are growing and being exacerbated in the current climate with the pandemic and a whole bunch of other things that people are facing. So let's talk about core values. So what are the core values that Freedoms New Zealand hold, and what differentiates Freedoms New Zealand from, let's say, some of the other minor Christian parties?
Well, I think I'd be far more upfront about our Christian faith. So, for instance, in my faith and family policy released last night, you'll see 7 policy legislations there particularly that I think are very forward. I think most Christians want this now. We don't want to be, fluffing around the edges and the sides. I think we need to stand up as a Christian community in this country and start to be recognised, have a louder voice, be seen and say, no, we've had enough of what's gone on in this country. And one of the things I put here first is to restore Christianity as our founding faith. And as if you know that Helen Clark in 2007 removed that particular, accepted, principle that Christianity was our founding faith. But she then removed it and then replaced it with a country that has no official religion and then invited other Eastern religions into our country, into a conference that I remember back then. I went up to Waitangi to oppose it and try to invite many of the churches of this country that we should turn up to this one. They are tampering with our Christian heritage and our Christian history. And we ought to stand there and say, no, we declare that New Zealand is a Christian country. We're founded on Christian values, and that's what must remain, particularly underneath our democracy of this country, because if they remove that, then they can remove every part of our faith and put us in the background and begin to roll out a lot of secular, and anti-Christian legislations, which they have done now.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners this morning too who share that concern. But historically, it's also been a challenge to try and mobilise the Christian community in terms of getting their vote together, as you'd well know. So what's different this time around? As you mentioned too, you've put yourself forward as a candidate, which is a first time for you. So yeah, what is different this time around for you?
I think that sometimes you have to have a lot more pain before you realise the purpose. And it's a shame, though, that I think the church is, I still believe it can wake up more. I mean, I would go as far as to say now that we need to be very careful in how we vote on the 14th of October for Christians. Any true Christian, you need to be looking very seriously at a party that's, lines up with all your values. And if they get a hold of this faith and family policy that we got here, we tick all the boxes that we need to be really strong with, upfront with, and I will make sure it will happen. These politicians and these parties now don't carry our values. In fact, we have some strains of movements and orientations for the transgender movement. We have issues with climate change, and you're looking at now parties who are actually coming out blatantly saying they have no interest in standing up for our Christian values. Chris Luxon, for instance, says he was a Christian, but then denied that he would touch the extremities of our abortion law, which I would. I'd put abortion back on the table, the extremes parts of it, and I'd also legislate the transgender movement and taken up women's spaces, women's sports, and legislate that there's only two genders. We would strongly bring back all of those things to protect our children's future.
Brian, we were starting to unpack some of the background to the party just before, and wanted to give you a chance as well to share your thoughts on how your party came together, because you've partnered with Sue Gray in terms of bringing Freedoms New Zealand together. For some people, they talk about the difference between, say, your background and Sue's, and whether or not it's an amalgam of a Christian and non-Christian party. Or what are your thoughts on that? What would you say to somebody who had questions around that?
Well, we're dealing with a population that's very diverse, and so the umbrella was formed so that we could unite all the small parties, and in uniting all the small parties, we knew then we had a chance to breach the 5%, which actually more than a chance, we could do it, and then start to get seats so we can have an influence in Parliament. My stand on this is that your Christian faith is strong enough and you are able to stand with people who are non-Christians. I think that's very important, that we should be in those places. How can I change a world that I'm not in? And where to shine our light and be the influencers and not to be influenced. I'm an effector and not affected. So I hold my confidence that when I join with parties and unite with them that are not necessarily of my faith, I seek to persuade them toward my faith, which has happened. And now you've got, say, Sue Gray's party, who's totally the opposite end of, say, our Christian-centred party. She is now coming around to even the thought that abortion, the extreme parts of it, first steps that I think we can put that back on the table. Should the Christian vote come behind us in the first 100 days, I would do that, especially that one.
Well, you've talked about restoring Christianity as our founding faith in New Zealand, but let's talk about some of the policies. If Freedoms NZ was to get into Parliament, and we know that many policies are put on the negotiating table and some get thrown out, some get pushed forward, which policies will you be pushing first and foremost?
Well, I think the most important one is to restore Christianity as our founding faith. I think that's very important. I count New Zealand as a great nation to live in, to raise our families in. It isn't that now, though. And I believe that is directly connected when we allowed Christ to be taken out of parliamentary prayer, when we allowed Helen Clark to take away our Christian heritage, when we allowed other outside sources that are totally anti-Christian to invade our parliament and do away with our values, to attack our families, erode our Christian faith. We need to come back strong in this election. And I hope the Christian people and those that truly want Christ back in our country would look at a party like Freedoms New Zealand, because they can trust me to carry the Christian faith with honour, integrity, and to do what I say.
It's a challenge too, though, on the political spectrum, because we've had, I'm thinking even back to, past forays of political parties trying to get in there and say, yep, we want to do that. But it's a bit of a meat grinder, is the old political landscape. And when it comes to being able to make a stand on those sorts of things, is it a matter of saying, a certain percentage of votes required, so you've got the leverage that you need? How would you see that working in a practical sense?
Well, I think we need a ballot box revolution. And a ballot box revolution is that a whole lot of people out there who really love our country, love their families and God, I put those three things there, that we vote differently. Don't vote for the parties in the past, particularly if you're a Christian, that you're uncertain about their views on our Christian faith. Whereas you know where Brian Tamaki stands and Hannah. We're great family people, 6 generations. I've preached the gospel in this country for 43 years. And started the Man Up ministry, which has turned many men's lives around and their families. So you can trust us. And we have a good reputation of not being afraid and not fearless in the face of people who would try and, put us down for our faith and back us up. I won't back up. I'll go forward and I will represent the Christian community. And I hope this year they would block vote Freedoms New Zealand. That's what I'm asking. Block vote Freedoms New Zealand, because our history is there to be read. I've been there, done that. I'm in a time of my life I have the experience. These guys know me. They're afraid of us. And so let's get together and do it.
Just being aware of time, New Zealand is facing a whole bunch of issues at the moment. We've got a cost of living crisis, crime is rife, and a lot of families are really feeling it. So what are some of the issues facing New Zealanders that are most urgent to Freedoms New Zealand?
I think straight away, again, it's so important that we've got to bring Christ back to our country. You can do all you like, but a nation that doesn't have the blessing of God, as it says in Psalms, then that nation is going to struggle. So I would first be unafraid and upfront to say any family that wants to recover from a cost of living crisis, they're not making ends meet, they want a house, say, to get their first home, and they want their jobs to be secure, then you need more than just what we can muster up as humans. We need supernatural help. We need God in our lives. I'm strong about that. But in reality as well, we must get the right people in Parliament. And you can't have a healthy nation if you've got a sick Parliament. And to be quite frank with you, we need more people in there who represent our faith, who represent the community in this country who, for a long time, I believe, have kept our country free and have kept it, in a place where we could all live, have enough to eat, work and do life with. But the moment we let our Christianity be shifted out, that's when we started to go downhill. So that's the first step I would do. Get the right people in there. Get the faith community together, back those that have the experience, have the faith, and let's change our nation for the better.
Well, Brian, the final question we have for you is the final question you've had for all of our political leaders who have come through, and maybe it's a shorter bow for you to draw than many of the others who have come through, but why should a Christian vote for you?
Well, I'm trustworthy. I won't betray the trust of the people, and that's seen and obvious in my history, and I will stand up for you, your family, and your children's safety for a prosperous future, a better future. Our experience says this is a great vote, a vote that you can trust, and we'll do the job and do the business for you.
Brian Tamaki from Freedoms New Zealand, thank you for coming in this morning.
No problems.